And here we go. So anyone talking will be immortalized forever. I don't want to single anyone out by name for not paying attention. Okay. All right. So I want to walk through this with you. So I'm going to go through question by question, but I'm going to scroll through. So our first question is, we're talking about basically doing some genetic engineering. And this is a different plasmid than pGLOHTR2A. This one is a newer one called pGLOHTR2A, and it actually has green fluorescent protein. Green fluorescent protein is a little, well, we've seen it. It's a beta barrel, and it is small, and it actually can be tagged onto or added onto your gene of interest, okay, just through genetic engineering. So what we can do is, you'll see the multiple cloning site right here downstream, and there's not as many enzymes listed for this one. So there's your multiple cloning site right there. There's green fluorescent protein gene. Now, which direction is this guy going? Yes?
Clockwise.
It's going clockwise. So these ones, this group engineered it that way. Now here, this one here is the promoter that drives that expression. So you want to make sure that your gene of interest is inserted into the multiple cloning site in that same direction. Okay, so again, you got to check these things out. AMP-R is our ampicillin resistance gene. That allows for bacterial selection. Okay, and then we've got these other elements, the F1 ORI and the origin replication, and ERIC-C is another selectable marker. But don't worry about that one. Our key here that we want to zone in on here is the green fluorescent protein right there. Okay? All right, so what's going to happen is then, if I put in a gene of interest downstream of it, that'll add this code upstream of our gene of interest. And our gene of interest today is this thing here, a gene called HTR2A. And that sucker is a serotonin receptor. Now, the open reading frame is this bright blue arrow here. And you'll notice that this particular format is done in a circular fashion. And that's just the way that a program called Vector B lays things up. Okay, it does everything in a circular format, but it's actually linear, because if we look at base pair number 1, in this about 1 o'clock position, and then we see this clock going around to about the 11 o'clock position. And then this gap in between. So this is actually linear. So we see that the total size of this fragment is 5,166 nucleotides, or base pairs, okay? Same thing. Same diff, all right? The open reading frame is right here. And we remember with the open reading frame that the beginning in the open reading frame is where the start codon is. And that arrow there is where the stop codon ends. What you're going to notice is that the open reading frame for the serotonin receptor is actually quite small compared to the entire length of the cDNA, which is 5,166. All right. So let's jump back and answer some questions here. So we've already established that green fluorescent protein is going clockwise. What's the restriction enzyme that's upstream? Upstream. Let me change that to blue so it kind of jumps out a bit. Maybe purple. Yes, sir? XMA1. And it's cutting at 333. Handouts are on the desk there. What? The handouts are on the desks. All right. So that's definitely our upstream. And we'll call that URE, upstream restriction enzyme. Okay? Now, we have to figure out which one's the downstream. So let's check that out. So if we look at our upstream enzyme, yes, sir? Okay. XMA1 is there on the map. Now let's find that one on our plasmid map. It's right there. And when you see a series of enzymes with dashes in between, that just means they cut at the same location. All right, so KPN1, TSPM1, and XMA1 all cut at 2079. Okay. You're going to notice this other one here. We're going to call this guy the fingerprint enzyme, BSM1 at 783. Now, does that cut upstream, within, or downstream of the open reading frame? Within. And so that's not a really good choice to use for recombination. We would lose that segment. Now, where is BSM1 in pGLOH? Yes, sir.
1097.
Yeah, 1097. Okay, I'm going to use the same color. Actually, I'll use like a pink for BSM1 here. Okay, so that pink color will represent the BSM1 of the pGLOHT. So there's one cut site of BSM1 inside of our insert, and one's that's cut inside of our plasmid. And so what we can do is call that one the fingerprint restriction enzyme. I like to call it that. FPRE for fingerprint. Because when we make our recombinant, what's going to happen is you're going to have two BSM1 sites a particular distance away from each other that have never happened before. Okay? So this one is going to be our check and double check and recheck. Now, like our example yesterday, we have two possible downstream enzymes. We could use EchoR1 and we could use XBA1. How do we determine which one is the correct choice? Any ideas? Yes, sir.
We do XBA1 because we want it to be more precise.
No, it doesn't have to do with, they're both going to be equally precise. So if we cut both with EchoR1, they're going to precisely match up with the AATT sticky ends, and XBA1 sticky ends will precisely match up, so it's not a matter of precision. Yep.
Is it its position on the plasmid map?
It's going to be where its position is in the plasmid map. So let's do a quick check on the plasmid map. Okay, I'm going to do some rough work over here. Okay, so I'm going to draw a circle right there, and let's find. Well, we know our XMN, our XMA1 here. Where's that guy? 2079, right? Okay, so XMA1 is our downstream restriction enzyme, DRE. Not DRE, just downstream restriction enzyme. Okay. Now, where is EchoR1 in relation to this? Upstream or downstream? Upstream, that's right. So if we look at EchoR1, we see that EchoR1 cuts at 2063, right? And I'm going to say, is this my upstream? Oh, I'm sorry. That should be the upstream enzyme. The question is, which one's the downstream? Okay. So XMA1 is on lock for the upstream enzyme. Right? It's the only choice I gave you. I did that on purpose. There are other enzyme cut sites that could have been chosen, but that's the one I did for this little setup here. Okay. And we notice then that XBA1 is cutting at 2090. Okay, so I'm going to use bright blue for my gene of interest, and we'll use green for the plasmid, because the plasmid contains a gene that encodes things in fluorescent green. That's my logic. Okay? So, which one would I use? Well, here's the option. Let's take a look at it. If we do an EchoR1 to XMO, that's too thick. Hold on. If we were to make an insert fragment with EchoR1 and XMO1, we know that XMO1 is going to be used for sure. That's our upstream. And if this one's our downstream, then what direction is that going to put our open reading frame? Clockwise or counterclockwise? Counterclockwise, right? Okay. Is that the correct direction? Wrong way. Okay, so let's verify up the other one then. If we go the other way and make XBA1 our downstream, and I'll just draw the fragment in here, like that, then which direction is our open reading frame going to go in this case? Clockwise, right? And that's the correct way. And I'm just writing it backwards, so it gives a sense of directionality. And why is clockwise the right direction? Yes, sir.
Well, because on our plasmid map, the arrows are going counterclockwise.
Okay, which arrow are we really keying in on particularly?
The GFP.
GFP, excellent, yeah. Okay, so this is the one that you want to key in on. And because we've got a promoter upstream of that, and I know I've got it shifted over a bit, but that's just because I'm doing some rough work. Okay? So I want my insert to be in the same orientation as the direction of the promoter that's driving GFP. Okay? So that means that XBA1 is the downstream. Downstream restriction enzyme. EchoR1 is not the downstream restriction enzyme. So that directionality you have to suss out. In the homework example I give you, it's with pBlueScript, KS, and TFEB, except I already preloaded it with the upstream and downstream. It's just for more practice. All right, so we've sussed that out. We figured that out. Okay. So that was a fair bit of work to answer this question here. And this shouldn't say DRDO, that's just a typo, HTR2A. And it's going to cut the open reading frame of this guy at 2985. Okay. So these are my dudes in blue here. Now it says how many base pairs is the plasmid fragment used for recombination to make our recombinant plasmid? So what we're going to do is figure out our calculations. Now we also have to factor in that BSM1 enzyme into the mix, okay, into doing our fragment analysis. So let's take a quick look. Now I'm going to erase this because I need some room for rough work. Okay, plasmid work. Here we go. I'm just going to draw a circle, maybe a double circle at that, so it's kind of nice and straightforward to look at. Down in this corner here, I've got XMA1, and that's going to be at 2079. And I've got XBA1 at 2090. Okay, so that means I want to cut that little chunk out. And that's going to be our total plasmid. So how big was that little bit?
$11.
11, okay. All right, and we know that our total size then is 5,371. So we can say pGLOHTR2A fragment for recombination. Well, that's just going to be 5,371 minus 11. Does that make sense? Have I lost anyone? Okay, cool. So let's scroll back up. And I'm going to, again, color that guy in green. Maybe I'll use a different shade of green for this one. So here's our downstream. I'll highlight that guy. Whoop, too much. What other enzyme site should we be paying attention to? Well, I want to know my distances for this guy here, 1097. So let's jump back to here. So all of this bit is keeper fragment. We're going to keep all this. I'm just going to color. While you guys figure out the sizes between BSM1 and XMA, and then this other long piece here. So you're going to want to have a calculator for this. So how big is that chunk there? From here to here. What goes in here for fragment length? Yes, sir.
932.
Sorry?
932.
932. So if I go, sorry?
980.
982. Okay. 982 is correct. Good. Okay, so then how about the other part? Well, how big is this green fragment here in total? The whole thing is 5,060, right? Because we popped out that 11, we're going to chuck that. How big is that bit then? How can we find out that piece? Really easy. What's it?
I needed 5,360 minus 982.
You got it. So 4,378. We're going to need that data later. Okay, let's do the same thing with the cDNA map of our gene of interest. And handily enough, it's also circular in its way. That was wonky. And just because it laid out in a circular format, you don't have to get psyched out for it. Okay? Well, this bit's easy. It cuts at 333, which means it also includes base pair number 1. So that little fragment there is going to fit like that. Okay, so our X bar has it down kind of in about a 7 o'clock position. $2,985. And then we got our BSM1 over here. That's 783. Again, this is kind of rough work, right? And I think I did this guy in purple. Okay, so how do we figure out that distance from XML1 to BSM1? What do we do? This is grade school work, by the way. Uh-huh. And even 450, right? Now, obviously, I've not drawn this to scale, but that's okay, because it's just rough work. Okay, and then from BSM1 to XBA. Yeah.
XML1 subtracted by DSMI, so it's that matter. You can subtract that.
Yeah, so we're going to go 2985 minus 783. All right. If I want to figure out what my total insert length is, I can do this a couple different ways. Well, I already know. It's really easy. This is discarded here. Because we know that our H2RA open reading frame is running, say about there. HTR2A, I should say. I'm just going to say serotonin receptor because I like serotonin, and I'm feeling it right now, which is nice. That's the reward of shelving snow so early. All right, so we've got a cut site upstream and downstream and within. So again, this is pretty straightforward, I think. And I hope it's starting to get straightforward to you. Is anyone confused on why the total insert length is 2,985? Okay. Actually, that's incorrect. Thank you. I made a boo-boo, and that's okay. That's why we do rough work. There it is. So 5 minus 3 is 2, 8 minus 3 is 5, 6, 2. There we go. Good save. Yep.
How do you know which parts don't cut?
Well, we already decided that. That was the first thing we did. Right? We figured out that if we use that one, well, that's the only one that's upstream, right? So then of these two, echo R1 would have put it in backwards. That was the first thing we sussed out. So now we knew that our cut sites, okay, were these two.
Why was echo around?
Because it would put the insert in backwards, counterclockwise. If I go here, upstream, and go downstream to echo R1, which direction did I go? Clockwise or counterclockwise? Where do I need to go? Right. So if I go X mod 1 to X mod 1, that's going to put my insert in, which needs to go clockwise. So that's how I figured out which ones to use. Okay. So our fragment then, total fragment length then, was 2,652. Okay, so if I go 5,360 plus 2,652, my grand total then is 8,112. Yes, sir?
Where do you get 5,360?
Where do I get that? Oh, I get it from here. So the total of pGLOH is 5,371, right?
Right.
I'm going to extract 11.
Oh, right.
and chuck that. I'm keeping that bright green, right?
Now it's,
You see it?
yeah.
Okay. So when we mix the bright green one with the bright blue one together, those fragments, we're going to get a recombinant. So we're keeping from 450 to 2202. And if we add those two together, well, they add up to 2,652 as well, don't they? So there's two ways you could have come to that answer. Okay, we could go 2,985 minus 333, because that's the beginning and that's the end. That's our total length. Or we can go, well, I know from XML 1 is 333 and BSM 1 is 783, so that's 450 plus 2,202. Gives me 2,652. All right, so the grand total then, 8,012. Okay, so we'll pop that down here. So if I cut this thing with just the upstream restriction enzyme, well, let's draw the map first. What's our location for our upstream enzyme? No, 2079. This XMA is going to go find that, and they're going to connect up. These guys are going to connect up. So we're going to replace that 11 with the 2,652. So that means that this is going to stay the same. And that one doesn't change. Okay? Because we're inserting stuff downstream of XML1, so that means that BSM1 and that BSM1, the pink one, and this XML1 are going to stay the same. We're adding stuff after those guys. Do you see the logic? So in our final recombinant is 1079 for BSM1. Okay, that's our first site. And that's 1079, right? And that was the pink one. Okay, where do we put this? I don't know, I'm getting everything backwards, I guess I'm rushing. I'll slow down. Yeah, 1097, you're right, I'm wrong. Thank you. 28 points to you. So where do I put this on that map? Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go 1097 divided by 8,012 times 360 degrees. And just round off to the nearest degree, okay? That's good enough for me. If you get a half degree, you can put a line in between the degree marks. That's cool. Okay, divided by 80212 is that times 360. Okay, I'm getting 49. Okay, so let's zoom in here and go like this. $1,097. Thank you, sir. Beautiful. Okay, I'm going to erase this work because you can pause, rewind. Who's next? Well, our next one up is the XML1 site. That was 2079. That's what I was getting backwards. Okay. Where does this guy go? Well, same calculation. So 2079 divided by 8012 times 360. Yeah, 93. 93.4. We can put it at 93.5. We can make that happen. That's closer. 93.5, 1, 2, 3, and then about there. And that is what we're going to call our upstream restriction enzyme. This one's a fingerprint restriction enzyme. Okay, you won't see those labels in a real lab or anything like that. I just make it up to orient myself as to where it's going. Okay, so we know, if we recall from our rough work up here, that's 982 in there. And that little segment is from our pGLOH DNA. So I'm just going to color that in green because our pGLOH is green fluorescent protein. And I used a bright blue for our gene of interest, which starts now. Okay, so how many base pairs further down the line are we going to go? Because we're now adding in this fragment. Are we adding the 450 next or the 2202? This requires some adding and thinking. Yes, sir. That's 450. Okay. So our next dude up to bat here is BSM1. But now this is like, okay, well, what is this? How do we find that then? We know to get there, we got to take 450 steps. From where, though? Where are we beginning? On this little track that's 8,012 steps. Let's pretend that's like a, you're wearing your Fitbit and every base pair is a step. So this track is 8,012 steps. To get to the second BSM1 site, the purple one, I'll color it in. It's 450 away from XMA, right? So where is it going to land on the map? Yes, sir.
2,529.
Okay, how'd you get that?
I added 450 plus the base pairs of X for 1.
Yeah. All right. So we're starting off at XMA1 and we're going to take 450 steps. 450 steps away is our next BSM1 site. So 2079 plus 450 gives us 2,529. Yep.
Where'd you get the 450?
450 is right there. So when this XMA1, which was at 333, but it's no longer, right? Because if we discard this 333, now that's the beginning of a fragment, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's going to go find the 2079. Okay? So this number 333 becomes 2079. It merges because of the overlap, remember? Okay? Those sticky ends connecting up. So then it's going to take 450 steps away. So now where do we find this? Well, we're going to go 2529 divided by 8012 times 360. $113.6. Okay, so I'm going to put that at 113.5. just to be fair. 1, 2, 3, and just halfway through there. So now we're into the insert fragment. So I'm going to color that one blue. That's our recombination. Hand one up there. Yeah? Question? Okay, so what's our next steps? Who's coming up next? What's our next enzyme?
XBOL1.
Yeah, XBOL1. And how many steps away is it?
195.
No.
No, sorry, 2,202.
Yeah, we're going to take, we're starting at 2,529. We're going to take 2,202 steps that way. Okay, so where's that put us? That puts us at 4,731. So where does this dude go? Well, we're going to go 4,731 divided by 8,112 times 360. That's going to park at 212.57. So I go 1, 2, and just in between those ticks there. And when we're on this side of the circle, it's okay, farm, to write the number after or before, or whatever, however you want to label it out. XBOL1. And I'll color code that one there. And that guy is our downstream. So this 2,202 is going to be colored in blue. And what's this last bit of green going to be? How many steps is that? Coming back around.
8,000 subtract about that.
That's going to be 4,378, right? We already calculated that earlier. And if you look at 4,378 and compare it to 8,012, that's more than half, isn't it? Right? And if we look at that fragment on the map, that's a bit more than half. Okay, so everything's kind of making sense, and the layout is beautiful. What's really cool is if you actually had the DNA sequence, you could program it. You could actually do cuts and pastes and paste it into a mapping software, and it would lay out exactly like this. All right, so let's clean up all this rough work here. And if you want to see how it's done, you can rewind the video. Well, there's our map. Okay, so let's say we did a digestion with just the upstream enzyme, which is XMA1. What size fragment would we get? Raise your hand when you know. I got one person. If I cut this thing with just XMA1, how big would that fragment be? I got one person. I'm crying inside. Maybe not inside. I got two people. If I cut this circle, if I cut this rubber band that's 8,012 steps, just there at location 2079, how big would my fragment be? No, it wouldn't be one.
But you cut it.
If I cut it with just the upstream restriction enzyme, which is XMON1, at 2079, how big will that fragment be? Oh, there's the hands up. Yeah, you. 8,012. Okay. And we would probably want to do that just to verify we indeed got the correct recombinant length. And to be redundant, we are going to do a digestion in another test tube with the downstream restriction enzyme. XBAR1. How big is that fragment going to be?
Why would it only be 800?
8,012? Because if I cut this circle that's 8,012 one time, the straight fragment is going to be that total length, isn't it? It becomes linear. Yeah, we linearize the plasmid. You got it. Good question. And if I did that with XBA1, what would I get? Yes?
8,012.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to double down. So we should see two beautiful bands of linearized plasmid. So they should both linearize if we got it right, so-called. And if you remember that very first video on cloning, the narrator said that weird things can happen in the test tube. So we want to make sure that we pick the right bacteria that gets this. Now, if we cut with both, this is going to be an easy answer, or it should be. What fragments should we get?
2,472.
Sorry?
2,472.
No,
Oh, don't you add it to it?
no. I'm going to cut with both, okay? So I'm going to cut there, and I'm going to cut there. No. That's a cut site location, not a fragment length.
Yeah, 450 plus 2,472.
Sorry, maybe I wasn't hearing you right.
Yeah,
What did you say?
I said 2,472.
2,000 plus 472. That's 450. If we cut with our downstream restriction enzyme and our upstream restriction enzyme, yeah, that's going to be the small one. Yeah. There you go. Now, your task is to tell me what would we get if we used BSM1. I'll give you a hint. 2 fragments. And there's where the story ends.